In the realm of Azure, managing identities is a cornerstone of ensuring secure and efficient access to resources. Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, is the backbone of identity management in Azure, providing a robust platform for handling user identities, authentication, and authorization. This presentation will delve into the intricacies of creating users and groups within Azure AD, a fundamental skill for any Azure administrator. By the end of this session, you will have a comprehensive understanding of how to manage Azure identities and governance effectively. Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, is a cloud-based identity and access management service. It helps employees sign in and access resources in external resources, such as Microsoft 365, the Azure portal, and thousands of other SaaS applications. Azure AD also provides access to internal resources like apps on your corporate network and intranet, along with any cloud apps developed by your organization. Understanding Azure AD is crucial for managing users and groups effectively, as it forms the foundation of identity management in Azure. Identity management is critical in ensuring that the right individuals access the right resources at the right times for the right reasons. It helps in protecting sensitive information, maintaining compliance with regulations, and enhancing operational efficiency. In Azure, identity management revolves around Azure AD, which allows administrators to create and manage users and groups, set up multi-factor authentication, and implement conditional access policies. Effective identity management reduces the risk of unauthorized access and data breaches. Creating users in Azure AD is a straightforward process, but requires attention to detail to ensure proper configuration. To create a user, navigate to the Azure portal, select Azure Active Directory, and then choose Users. Click on New User and fill in the necessary details such as name, username, and password. You can also assign roles and configure additional settings like job title, department, and contact information. Properly setting up user accounts is essential for maintaining security and ensuring users have the appropriate access to resources. When creating a user in Azure AD, several properties and settings need to be configured. These include basic information like name and username, as well as more detailed settings such as job title, department, and contact information. Additionally, you can assign roles to users, which determine their level of access within the Azure environment. It's also possible to configure password settings, including requiring the user to change their password on first login. Properly configuring these settings ensures that users have the appropriate access and that their accounts are secure. User roles in Azure AD define what actions users can perform within the Azure environment. There are several built-in roles, such as Global Administrator, User Administrator, and Billing Administrator, each with specific permissions. Assigning roles to users is a critical aspect of identity management, as it ensures that users have the necessary permissions to perform their tasks without overprivileging them. To assign a role, navigate to the user's profile in Azure AD, select Assigned Roles, and choose the appropriate role. Regularly reviewing and updating user roles is essential for maintaining security and compliance. Azure AD Groups are a way to manage multiple users collectively, simplifying the administration of permissions and access. Groups can be used to assign access to resources, applications, and roles to multiple users at once, rather than individually. There are two types of groups in Azure AD: security groups and Microsoft 365 groups. Security groups are used for managing member and computer access to shared resources, while Microsoft 365 groups provide collaboration features by integrating with services like Outlook, SharePoint, and Teams. Creating groups in Azure AD is similar to creating users. Navigate to the Azure portal, select Azure Active Directory, and then choose Groups. Click on New Group and fill in the necessary details such as group name, description, and membership type. You can choose between assigned, dynamic user, and dynamic device membership types. Once the group is created, you can add members and configure group settings. Managing groups effectively allows for streamlined administration and ensures that users have the appropriate access to resources. Dynamic groups in Azure AD automatically add and remove members based on specific criteria, such as user attributes. This feature is particularly useful for large organizations where manually managing group membership would be time-consuming. To create a dynamic group, Select Dynamic User or Dynamic Device as the membership type when creating the group. Then, define the rules that determine group membership. For example, you can create a rule that adds all users in a specific department to the group. Dynamic groups ensure that group membership is always up to date and aligned with organizational changes. Assigning roles to groups in Azure AD simplifies the management of permissions and access. Instead of assigning roles to individual users, you can assign them to a group, and all members of that group will inherit the role's permissions. This approach is particularly useful for managing access to resources and applications for teams or departments. To assign a role to a group, navigate to the group's profile in Azure AD, select Assigned Roles, and choose the appropriate role. Regularly reviewing and updating group roles is essential for maintaining security and compliance. Conditional access policies in Azure AD allow administrators to control how and when users can access resources. These policies can be based on various conditions, such as user location, device state, and application being accessed. For example, you can create a policy that requires multi-factor authentication for users accessing the Azure portal from outside the corporate network. Conditional access policies enhance security by ensuring that access to resources is granted only under specific conditions. Implementing these policies requires careful planning and regular review to adapt to changing security requirements. Multi-factor authentication, MFA, adds an extra layer of security to the authentication process by requiring users to provide 2 or more verification methods. These methods can include something the user knows, password, something the user has, a mobile device, or something the user is, fingerprint. Enabling MFA in Azure AD significantly reduces the risk of unauthorized access, as it makes it much harder for attackers to compromise user accounts. To enable MFA, navigate to the Azure AD portal, select Users, and then Multi-Factor Authentication. From there, you can configure MFA settings and enforce its use for all or specific users. Self-service password reset in Azure AD allows users to reset their passwords without administrator intervention. This feature enhances user productivity and reduces the administrative burden on IT staff. To enable SSPR, navigate to the Azure AD portal, select Password Reset, and configure the settings. You can specify which users are allowed to use SSPR and define the authentication methods required for password reset. Enabling SSPR ensures that users can quickly regain access to their accounts if they forget their passwords, while maintaining security through verification methods. Monitoring and reporting are crucial aspects of managing Azure identities and governance. Azure AD provides various tools and features for tracking user activities, auditing changes, and generating reports. These tools help administrators identify potential security issues, ensure compliance with policies, and make informed decisions. For example, you can use Azure AD's audit logs to track changes to user accounts and group memberships, or generate sign-in reports to monitor user access patterns. Regular monitoring and reporting are essential for maintaining a secure and well-governed Azure environment. Effective identity management in Azure requires following best practices to ensure security and efficiency. Some key practices include regularly reviewing and updating user roles and group memberships, implementing multi-factor authentication, using conditional access policies, and enabling self-service password reset. Additionally, it's important to monitor user activities and generate reports to identify potential security issues and ensure compliance with policies. By following these best practices, administrators can maintain a secure and well-governed Azure environment, reducing the risk of unauthorized access and data breaches. Managing users and groups in Azure AD is a fundamental skill for any Azure administrator. By understanding how to create and manage users and groups, assign roles, implement conditional access policies, and enable multi-factor authentication, administrators can ensure that their Azure environment is secure and well-governed. The next steps involve applying these concepts in real-world scenarios, continuously monitoring and updating identity management practices, and staying informed about new features and best practices in Azure AD. With these skills, administrators can effectively manage Azure identities and governance, contributing to the overall security and efficiency of their organization.